One of the most twisted verses in modern Christianity that people love to quote is, "A man is not justified by the works of the law." And then they try to act like that means the Torah is over, obedience is optional, and grace replaces the standard. No, that's not what the text says. That's what church tradition does to the text. Because a lot of Christians love to quote that line like it ends the entire conversation, and then they act like the commandments are a burden, and if you still uphold Torah, you just don't understand Yahusha. And that's not what the verse says. That's what a lawless church system has trained people to hear. But here's the category that keeps collapsing. Not justified by works of the law isn't the same thing as the law no longer matters. Those are two completely different claims. Justification is about how a man is declared right before Elohim. It's not a statement that sin disappeared. It's not a statement that obedience became rebellion, and it's not a statement that Torah stopped defining righteousness. It means that you don't establish your standing before Elohim by flawless legal performance. That's it. But the church smuggles in a second claim that doesn't follow. If you're not justified by works of the law, then the law is gone. And that's a flat out lie, because Scripture never says not justified by law, therefore the law is evil, therefore obedience is legalism, therefore sin no longer needs a standard, therefore the Torah can be ignored. Because that jump is a fake, and you can expose it fast. So if the law's gone, then what is sin? What defines adultery? What defines theft? What defines idolatry? What defines rebellion? What defines the Sabbath? What defines righteousness in actual behavior? That's one thing that they can't actually answer. Why? Because their system still needs the standard every single day while pretending the standard's gone. And that's what you call hypocrisy. And that's exactly the same disease Yahusha exposed in the Pharisees. Yes, they knew the law. Yes, they looked holy on the outside, but Yahusha didn't rebuke them because Torah was bad. He rebuked them because they performed righteousness outwardly while inwardly being corrupt. And that's why he called them whitewashed tombs. Clean outside, death inside. And that's why he said they tithed mint and dill and cumin, but neglected the weightier matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. He didn't say the law was the problem. He said their hypocrisy was. And that matters because modern Christianity acts like the Pharisee problem was too much law. Nope. The Pharisee problem was fake obedience, selective obedience, outward performance, and inward rot. And modern Christianity does the opposite version of the same hypocrisy. Now the system says we aren't justified by works of the law, therefore don't bring up Torah, don't bring up obedience, don't bring up the Sabbath, don't bring up the feast days, don't bring up covenant order, just believe and stop sounding legalistic. That's still hypocrisy. One side looked holy outwardly while the inside was dead. The other side talks grace outwardly while using it to excuse lawlessness inwardly. Both are corrupt. And now here comes the other fraud. Well, Paul was for the Gentiles, as if that means Paul brought a whole new standard for the nations. Show me where Yahusha taught one standard for Jews and another for Gentiles. Show me where sin changed for the nations. Show me where idolatry stopped being idolatry for Gentiles. Show me where adultery stopped being adultery for Gentiles. Show me where the covenant standard got split into two. Let me tell you something. You can't. So what the church actually teaches is nonsense. The law of Moses is over, but the 10 Commandments still stand. Really? then what are the 10 Commandments doing there if the law's over? Because the 10 Commandments aren't floating moral slogans, they are the covenant core. The headings, the table of contents, the rest of the Torah is the content that defines them, guards them, and applies them. So, no, you don't get to throw out the law of Moses and keep the 10 that still sound respectable. You don't get to keep do not murder while trashing the covenant structure that defines justice. You don't get to keep do not steal while throwing out Torah's definitions of restitution and fraud. And you sure as hell don't get to keep remember the Sabbath while teaching people the Sabbath doesn't matter. That's not exegesis, that's selective religion. Now, let's use Scripture against the lie. Galatians chapter 2 verse 16 says, a man is not justified by works of the law. Fine. Then what do you do with Romans chapter 3 verse 31? Do we not make void the law through faith? Elohim forbid. Yeah, we establish the law. What do you do with Romans chapter 7 verse 12? The law is holy and the commandment holy, and just and good. What do you do with 1 John chapter 3 verse 4? Sin is the transgression of the law. What do you do with Matthew chapter 5 verse 17 to 19? Yahusha said, don't even think he came to abolish the Torah or the prophets. So which is it? Either Paul is fighting Paul, John is confused, and Yahusha misspoke, or your church system is twisting one category statement about justification into a full-blown anti-Torah religion. And that's exactly what happened. Paul isn't saying live however you want. Paul isn't saying the Torah is gone. Paul isn't saying Gentiles get a new moral system. And Paul isn't saying grace means no standard. He's saying you're standing before Elohim isn't something you boast as in though you earned it by perfect legal performance. That's not the same as saying obedience no longer matters. Once justified, you don't turn around and call the standard bondage. You don't call obedience legalism, and you don't use grace as a shield for rebellion. That's not grace. That's lawlessness wearing a church face.